freedom, freedom over fame, freedom over cycle stays the same.
All right, and 3, 2, 1sies. Here we are, recording. Parable of the Sower. Band baddies.
I never know what you're gonna pull, honestly.
I like to live it up. I like to mix it up. Okay. I guess
good.
She rolled her eyes. I just want there were no visuals on that, but that was a solid eye roll right there.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Band Together.
Welcome. I'm super excited about this episode because honestly, there's a whole lot to talk about with Parable of the Sower. And a lot of things are really lining up between not only is this book set in our current year, like it begins in 2024, but we see a lot of the themes like really aligning. Is that the reason why you chose it?
Yeah, it was actually. I didn't know that it was set in 2024. I knew that it was set in a dystopian future. And then I opened it to like July 24th of 2024 and I was like, fuck.
I know. It's definitely very interesting because we have these classic books that we talk about. And when kids usually read these books in high school, things like that, you always think of it as like this futuristic, whoa, that's crazy. You know what I mean? And then we're here reading these things again, and it's set in the time we're actually living in.
She wrote it in 1993. And I remember the 90s, and I remember thinking that by the time like the 2020s would be around, we'd have flying cars. So I get it.
We can blame Back to the Future for that one.
Not Back to the Future. Back to the Future was not a flying car. It was a time traveling car.
Okay, sorry.
It was like, what was the cartoon?
The Jetsons?
Yes, it was very much that. Some of us didn't mute our phones before we started recording.
So it's silence now.
She's so popular.
I know. I've got 2 best friends, and they like to hit me up at least once a month. So the big deal.
At least once a month. Wow.
Yeah, that's friendship in your 40s right there. We have to actually schedule time.
I'd like to clarify, I'm not in my 40s.
But I just turned 40 for everybody out there, and so happy to be 40, honestly. I thought it was going to feel differently. You know, you think about it in such an abstract way when you're in your 20s, your 30s, things like that. Honestly, I totally understand like people when they're like, yeah, you feel the same on the inside, and then time just passes. Luckily, I don't know. It's great to be 40. I have no qualms with it.
And that's on aging.
You heard about that new pill that's coming out, right? That can I showed you that content about it, how it like turns back the hands of time.
It extends something in your X chromosome or something like that, right? And it basically reverses the aging process. But the reason why she showed it to me, do not be mistaken, she does not want it for herself. She wants it for Paramore, our dog, to extend her life for as long as we can have her. And I don't blame her. I do not blame her.
Yeah. But they are doing human trials of it. So it basically, they use stem cells to talk to our genetics and turn back the hands of time, presumably. We should see that rolling out.
We are living in like dystopian times. That's real sci-fi.
There's so many things coming out. I was just reading about
Elon Musk has a robot girlfriend.
And he's developing technology to give people robotic limbs with the brain implants that they're having, which controversial, right? Like we're turning people into robots all of a sudden. I think anybody...
I'm numb to anything that's happening in the world. So.
But to the people who are missing limbs, could be life-changing, right?
Yeah, so, super cool.
I'm not the person to talk about that from a first-person standpoint, but I hope that it helps. I was reading they're going to be coming out with painkillers that are not opioids. So therefore, they do not have addictive properties.
Ooh, that's cool.
And I think that would really help the world, right?
I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I was just reading it. I think who knows of the validity of it? It was on like one of those Apple News podcasts, but I'm going to take it for good news if that is actually true.
And there's been a cure for cancer.
Rolling out a pill form as well that's basically just annihilating tumors within, I think they said like 11 weeks.
Something like that.
I haven't dug into the science behind that, just read the stories on them. But I would attribute a lot of our technological advances in the next 5 to 10 directly related to AI. They're just filtering it through there and putting dots together that they weren't able to do themselves. So for that, I welcome it. But getting back to the book, and I think that's something that we say a lot in this podcast, but back to the book, right? We are going to tackle Parable of the Sower. And for a while in my head, I was calling it Parable of the Sower. So I just had to learn the correct way to say that. Adri, I think you have some facts about the book, the author, things like that we want to talk about.
It's just a little synopsis of it. So the Parable of the Sower is set in current day America, so 2020s. Society has collapsed due to climate disasters, economic inequality, widespread violence. People are living in walled communities or trying to survive in a world where safety is a luxury. I think we see a new kind of religion. And the main character, Lauren, is a young woman that possesses something called hyper empathy, which I think so spot on. That 30 years ago, someone was writing about hyper empathy, where now we have accepted mental health and we talk about it much more openly. And that's like a joke within us and within the world as a whole, that we are so acknowledging of mental health and not dysfunctions or disorders, but just mental health as a whole. So super cool that this is the twist on that, is that she's hyper empathetic. So she can feel people's pains, people's pleasure. Her whole community is destroyed. Lauren is set on this journey north towards Sacramento.
Yeah, I think so.
So she's in California, all while developing this new belief system called Earthseed. And Earthseed is built around the idea of quote unquote goddess change, and that humanity's destiny is to take root amongst the stars, quote unquote. So just really interesting. The book was really a slow start for me a little bit.
It's the same for me as well. So anybody who's trying to tackle it, just know right around 2027, it really gets
it really
to
pops
light
off.
up.
Yeah. So it was a slow start, but then, and you told me, because Jeanna was further along in the book than I was. So she was like, once you get to this point, you're really invested in the characters. And it was true. I was really invested in what was going to happen next. So I really enjoyed the actual book itself and the storytelling of it. And there is a part 2, which we haven't decided yet if we're going to read. Even if we don't do it for the podcast, I may just read it on my own. I've gone on this reading kick, but for a different podcast, for a different day, just a little quick shout out. I am reading A Court of Thorns and Roses. If anyone knows that, I'm on book 3 right now. Let's talk about Tamlin, but that's a different story for a different day.
There's people at home right now cheering, and I have not read this series, but she's been up late nights, really just giving me the lowdown on this little series.
Tamlin is trash. We love Reese.
But from what I hear in the first book, people are like, "Yay, Tamlin," and then they get surprised later on. Yeah. I think we saw that TikTok where somebody said that somebody got a Tamlin tattoo and then regretted it a little bit later.
So anyways, but back to this book. Yeah, I actually really enjoyed reading this book, and typically a big fan of sci-fi type things, although I really loved the Hunger Games, and we've read a lot of dystopian books. But this one was really interesting because it was weird to acknowledge that it was within 2024, 2025. And a lot of the themes that we're going to obviously get into with climate change and with just a kind of anarchy type of society where everyone's fending for themselves, and what kind of happens when this just group of strangers really have to rely on each other and build community all over again, which is, what the world is feeling like. Just everyone's trying to find community where they belong, and we're dealing with the effects of climate change, and hopefully it never gets to this point, but we'll see.
Before we actually dive deeper into the book and sometimes get a little bit off topic, let's talk about Octavia Butler. Butler was a groundbreaking science fiction writer. She holds a unique place in the literary history. She was born in 1947 in Pasadena, California. Woo! And we got to give a little shout out because Adri was also born there.
I was born in LA, but I was
you were mostly raised in
Pasadena area.
Yeah. So Butler was inspired to write from a young age. Her experience as a Black woman in a predominantly white, male-dominated literary field deeply influenced her writing. Her work often explores themes like power dynamics, survival, and social hierarchies. So Butler's stories aren't just about imagined figures, they're about the present. She used science fiction to comment on issues like racism, sexism, and environmental destruction. The parable of the sower is a dead-on perfect example of how she took contemporary concerns and she projected them into a not-so-distant future.
She was also a receiver of the McCarthy Genius Grant and a Penn West Lifetime Achievement Award winner for her body of work, which is super cool. And because this is the Band Together podcast, we want to talk about, obviously, where this book has been challenged. So The Parable of the Sower has faced challenges and banned in several places, both in the U.S. and internationally. But supplies, Texas and Florida have banned this book due to its depictions of violence, harsh language, and criticism of organized religion. So is it violent? Is it a little bit harsh? Sure is. I wouldn't say that this is something I would give to a middle schooler, but I definitely don't think that this is something I would shy away from like a high schooler having. So just saying, what do you think?
There are two different things that pull on my heartstrings when we talk about banned books. And one is I always want to protect like kids' innocence for as long as possible. So I do understand.
That's so optimistic of you. Always.
Yeah, that's true. I think that there's something to the fact that at least until you're at a certain age, you want to try to get positive content in your kid's head as much as you can, because at some point you're going to lose control and they're going to be just running around out on their own. And I do think that audio visual experiences is an energy transfer, right? And so do I want my kid to be filled with negative energy or positive energy? Obviously, most likely positive energy. So the other side of that coin is I also want my kid to be a critical thinker.
That's where I had, we don't have children, so it's really hard for me to say what I would do as a parent because I'm the kind of aunt who makes my nieces and nephews like hyper sanitize their hands anytime they touch anything. So I'm not to say that as a parent, I wouldn't want them to be super sheltered, but as someone who grew up really sheltered and then had to experience a lot of the first in the world and it was really shocking and scary, I think I would want to allow them to explore difficult topics within the safety of pages. And with fictional character, like the character of the book, kind of experience and feel these emotions through the characters without having to personalize it so much. Or even though it reflects a lot of what society is going through today, and a lot of the themes are similar to things that we discuss and we see in policies, and we see, the presidential election. We are 73 days away from the next election in the United States. I think within the safety of a book is a really nice way to explore and have an open discussion. But that also would require parents to, and again, I'm not criticizing a parent because I don't have children and I can't do that, but it would be a nice way for a parent to, if they are that concerned, then have that discussion with what does it look like when infrastructure fails? What does it look like when religion is what people go to? And why do people go to religion when they're scared and everything around them is crumbling?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think one of the things that I really love about our relationship is that we've both had very different upbringings as to where
you were thrown in raw into the world.
Right. So I was somebody who was like more so filled with negative content, and pretty much all of that content was real life for me. I can definitely understand why both of us would feel the way that we did. I do think that there's an age, and I
don't think it's like for a little kid.
Yeah.
But I think once someone's in high school, I think they're much more mature than people give them credit for.
Oh, I had such complex thoughts when I was in high school. I was really wrapping my mind around life.
Yeah, and I remember feeling, and this is a personal experience, so take it with a grain of salt, but I remember feeling like underestimated as a human.
Mm-hmm.
Like people thought I couldn't possibly know what I wanted or liked or disliked because I was quote unquote too young. And although even so, perfect example would be like something happened recently with my nephew, and I was like, he's so frustrating. Mm-hmm. But he's an adult. And he's not in high school. He's like in college and about to get his bachelor's. So
he's a true adult.
He's a true adult. But like sometimes I still think of him like a kid because I watched him grow up. Mm-hmm. And I remember when he was in high school, and I've always been so impressed with him specifically because he does have complex thoughts and he does have like ideas for the future. So I think when someone's in high school is like a perfect time. 0 to 8 are your formative years where you create like your belief systems about the world, right?
Mhm.
That has been proven and it's been studied that 0 to 8 are your formative years. However, I think your teenage years and really into your 20s is a time where you're gathering as much information, and it's a time where you can start to either reinforce or decode the learning that you've already done.
Depending on your experience.
Exactly. And I'm in my 30s now and I'm still doing that. So it's not to say that we're ever done doing that per se, but what a cool time to get your hands on a book that's like super anti-establishment, dark. It's a little, what would you do if you were presented with a life or death scenario? Would you kill someone to survive?
Yeah.
And I know that's super dark, but again, we live in 2024 when really everyone has a cell phone at their fingertips. My nieces who are in junior high do. So they could get worse content than this. And I think maybe in 1993 when this came out and no one had cell phones, sure. People were scared of this being in someone's hands and then this sparking the critical thinking. But today, in today's age, it's super hard for me to rationalize why they would ban a book that's really PG compared to what someone can just get at the click of their fingertips.
And I think you make a really good point too. And again, I'm definitely not a mother, but I have.
You are a mother to puppets.
I am a mother to your puppets.
To the mother of my puppets.
As she likes to remind me all the time. But I think that in taking care of my cousins when I needed to, I was also very young, so I didn't get a chance to really look at it from this perspective, a true parental perspective. It was really just, we had to take care of each other when I was the oldest. And then taking care of...
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Knowing what I know about you and how you grew up, and having read this book and kind of the dynamic between Lauren and the other characters, do you feel like, I know that you raised them in a very parental way, but do you feel like this was your own little hodgepodge group of vagabonds moving through the world?
Not with them specifically. I really think that if I were to compare that, it was like later on in my 20s, because my family unit has not always been super strong. Like I think you have a very strong family unit. I recreated it in my friendships. And
yeah,
so
you did.
A lot. Even the friends that you've never known that I've had, like when I was going through welding school and in oil refinery work, just being single, I feel like it's me specifically, I really like a lot of diversity. So I would tend to have a group of people around me that probably never would have been together had I not been the glue. And that kind of rang true in history, as that after I left the equation, those people went on about their lives. And with my godson as well, his mom was always around, dad not always. And she had him pretty young, like in her 20s. We were just trying to help each other out at that point as well. But I think now, knowing what I know, and again, hindsight's 2020, I do think that 12, 13, 14, that's when we really need to, because you're right. I think that if we're introducing complex thought to these kids who are already having these thoughts, you can't stop these kids from having these thoughts, but
it's like an honoring and a respect and an expansion of something that they're already feeling and allowing them to explore it and exercise those muscles.
And you can be a part of it.
Yeah.
Is that the thing? If they're, especially kids out there right now who are consuming internet content like it's fucking candy, and you don't really have a lot of control over that most of the time. Some parents can, and they really get strict with electronics and stuff. But,
well, and the algorithm will feed you the things that you want. So you're not always you end up in a bubble, in a vacuum is what I found, at least with my algorithm. If I like something, I get fed more and more of that. And it's just a confirmation bias, right? Where a book like this can, if this isn't your usual content, it can go, what would it look like if the world collapsed around us?
Yeah. And you can literally like go with them on that journey and be like, how did this make you feel? And you can dive deeper. For example, have a few things symbolism wise, because stuff like that really gets my goat.
Gets your goat?
Gets my goat.
What does that mean?
I don't know. I've heard it before.
Gets you going?
Because I was partially raised by my grandparents. So if you see some old sayings
I
seeping
thought you
through
were
there.
trying to say it gets me going and you just heard it incorrectly, but you
No.
actually heard it gets my goat.
Yeah,
All
gets
right,
my goat.
gets my goat.
There was a couple things that were,
While you look for that,
yeah.
I think one thing that I took away from the book that I really did enjoy, how she found a way to create her own little community within what she had. The talk of Earthsea, which is her religion, it really reminds me of that quote, grow where you are planted. And I like it though, because I'm having a really hard time currently as we transition into our new space that we live in and the world that is the world that we live in. And today is August 24th, 2024. So at this point, most of you know that Joe Biden has dropped out of the election and Kamala Harris is the official nominee for the Democratic Party. The DNC just happened this last week. And I have a lot of feelings, or lack thereof of feelings. So she is making the absolute best with shit around her. And I love that resilience in a character, and I wish to embody that kind of resilience. Specifically, the fact that she has this hyper empathy is so relatable to me specifically, because sometimes I feel so stimulated by what's happening around me that I almost go numb. There's so much stimulation that I'm almost numb.
Mhm.
And my version of that is I completely go into, I either scroll on TikTok, I just completely distract myself, or I'm just a ball of emotions. And somehow through that, she's still moving forward. She's still being grounded to some extent. She's definitely in a fight or flight kind of
Mhm.
environment where she has to pretend to be a man to
Mhm.
survive and all of these things that I wouldn't want to experience. But really, she's still herself. And for all the girlies out there, it's because she's journaling, guys. She's journaling her thoughts. She's getting it out of her body and
Mhm.
she's putting it down and she's working her way through this super traumatic experience. So I don't know. I really loved this part of the book. I really liked this character. I really liked this main
Lauren?
character. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that takes us to who's your favorite character, right?
Right.
So Lauren's yours.
Yeah, I think so. I think she's obviously the main character, but I find her to be so strong and
She is strong for being so young,
for
especially.
being so young, such a cool example of what it means to lean into your personal gifts and not shy away from them and turn them into superpowers.
I'm going to use this to piggyback off of the symbolism I was talking about. So
Go for it.
one of the things that I think also symbolizes her strength is one of the biggest things symbolism-wise is the acorn, which is symbolizing potential new beginnings. This is stuff that you would probably break down more in like a class, but because the symbolism's so heavy in this book, as I was reading it, I was like, wow, it's laying on thick with all the symbolism, right? Like,
Sometimes when books do that, I get super annoyed.
yeah, you're like, we get it.
Like-
and obviously the fire, that's going to symbol,
Mhm.
destructive force. It's the most destructive force in this book. They have a drug called pyro
Mhm.
that's symbolistic in and of itself.
Oh, that's super cool. We should talk
Yeah.
about that. What pyro is.
What pyro is. So it's like a drug that makes people basically go crazy and they get high off of fire.
Like watching fire.
So they get stoked, they go around, they set shit on fire. So just completely destructo. And it's linked to pill form, right?
Yeah.
Or the drug in the book.
Which again, such a smart way to talk about like an epidemic that's going on in the world, which
Amazing.
I think
right?
has taken a back burner right now with everything that's going on in our real world, but so accurate. And what's the word? So accurate and so reflective of the times.
The book uses water as basically the scarcity, because water is scarce in these times, right? So
Mhm.
it's a life symbol. It's like a survival symbol, right?
Mhm. We haven't even talked about the fact that they're in chaos because of climate change.
Which, according to scientists, we're right around the corner from that situation. You know what I mean?
I think I really do. I know no one's asking this of me right now, but I really do think we're just like a couple steps away from something super similar. I think if I'm not incorrect, I think I saw something that said that like China is now trying to source ways of creating or cleaning their water so that they can have like reservoirs of clean water for their people. It's going to be like the next new commodity because we're running so low on actual drinkable water on Earth.
For them specifically, they're so highly populated. They're
Yeah.
densely populated. So I can imagine water for their cities, it will be a resource that is going to be scarce if not handled proactively.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Sorry, you were talking about water.
Yeah. Just in the book, it's a life source. It's a representation of scarcity and kind of what they're struggling through. And I think that a lot of Lauren's character, because she wants to start Earthseed, which is in her way a religion.
Mm-hmm.
So that's symbolizing the restructure of society.
Mm-hmm.
Just herself and her little heart and her little earth seed, God has changed.
Yeah.
Like it's really symbolic of starting over. And the whole journey is of self-realization and actualizing oneself. And they put it into literal term, an actual journey from one spot to another. And they're using all of these the whole time. I'm like, oh shit, that's California. Oh shit, the 101. Very relatable to me, but
I will say this. I'm so sorry to interrupt you and go on a side tangent. But
No, you're
okay,
fine.
so with the 2024 election and with Kamala being now the elected nominee for Democrats, I've been having the disconnect. But the one thing that I have been consistently like I keep seeing everyone being like so fucking stoked about her. And I'm not saying that I'm not excited for her. I'm absolutely going to vote for her in 2024. She is going to be, in my mind, the next president of the United States. Not exactly where everyone is on how like stoked they are about her specifically. But what I am is I have this like almost surprising amount of patriotism that has sparked inside of me, but not for the United States, for California specifically. Like in the last 3 weeks or so, every time I see something about California, I'm like, that's right. That's right. I don't know. I'm just so happy and grateful to be here. I'm so happy to live in a state that has protected my freedom for as long as it possibly has. I'm so excited and so happy to be from the state that Tupac lived in. Like, I know that sounds so stupid and trivial, but I do have a weird amount of pride right now in being a Californian.
I don't think it's weird.
I also now happen to live in one of the most beautiful cities, so that could be part of it.
And I've lived all over this state, like
all over the country.
All over the country, but specifically all up and down California, from Northern California to Southern California, the most southern part of California. And there truly is no other state like it, honestly. And I can't speak for other progressive states like New York, because honestly, that's one of the states I have not visited, which also seems like magical in its own way. But, and I'm completely biased, but every other state that I've gone to just doesn't hold a coin. And it doesn't. It's very much as progressive as you can get. And there's just opportunity everywhere.
That's what I've been feeling lately. There's always something wrong, right? There's always something bad going on in the world. And I haven't about everything that's happening in Gaza and with Palestinians and Congo and everything that is happening with basically them being active slaves. And yet I feel some sort of hope right now. And I almost feel reluctant to share that hope because I'm scared that it'll be taken away, like in an evil eye kind of way. But truly, I've started to feel hope. For everyone who's followed our podcast and for everyone who's listened to all 10 episodes before this one, in this episode, I am actually telling you, I am feeling hope for the first time in a long time.
And because you and I were talking about this, and let me be very clear, I'm super floored by people's response to Kamala. I'm excited about what she is bringing out in the people around her. And as somebody who's been a lifelong feminist, the thought of having a woman of color in president for the first time in United States history makes me want to cry. Absolutely. Just what she symbolizes. And you and I were talking about this subject a little bit because I'm sure everybody's feed on social media is absolutely filled with politics because they know that's the best way to reach us all at this point in time. So I'm sure we're not the only ones that are getting like either hit with this wave of femininomenon and all of these like really just genius campaigning ads, and or the opposite, which maybe if you're somebody who's more conservative, you're getting pumped up on Trump right now, or we're seeing a lot of content that's just like bashing him and saying that he's like freaking out because it's taken such a flip. we're getting just bombarded with all kinds of feelings with this whole situation. And I settled on the fact a long time ago that politicians are politicians, and I don't put my whole heart into who they are. But I think what Kamala is representing is, for the longest time, we've just been like, great, we got to vote for another fucking white guy, like an old fucking white guy.
Yeah.
And it felt regressive. It felt
like a slap in the face.
who you're making a bunch of people of color and progressives vote for this guy who, and there are some things I like about Biden. There's some things that I don't like about Biden.
Mm-hmm. I don't think there's any politician out there that I can wholeheartedly be like, I'm 100% behind them. So let's just be really clear about that. Whenever we're talking about politics, we see both sides of everything and try to be as well-rounded with our perspective. So I guess what we're trying to express, I'm sorry, did I just cut you off?
No, it's okay, because I don't think that you really dug into your confusion with Kamala. So
yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is I was having a hard time getting ready for us recording because I don't want to lie. I don't want to come on here and be like, yes, bitch, brat, summer, fuck yeah, phenomenon, whatever the fuck. I think whoever is managing her campaign is fucking knocked it out of the park for anyone who is younger and who has been so disillusioned by what politics has been up until now. But this is the ebb and flow that we experience in the United States. We have these lulls and then we have a fucking killer campaign come through. But that's exactly what it is. It's a campaign. And I would love to see in the next probably 10 years a change in the way that we do politics in this country, and to not make it, what is the word I'm looking for? So pandery. Because when she was the VP pick, I did a deep dive way back when. And there were things about her that, yeah, she's from California. So yes, she's progressive. Yes, by most people's standards, she's progressive. But there have been some things with her in terms of handling immigration or truancy for children and just how she deals with, she was the Attorney General of the state of California. And there were just a couple of things like she like supported the 3 strikes rule.
Which is crazy racist.
Right.
Crazy racist.
100. And there were things, and I think I am in the minority. Again, I will preface this with, I will be voting for her. She will be who I will be voting for in November. But I also don't feel like I have to jump on this bandwagon of, yes, bitch, queen, slay, blah, 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 blah. Because I can also be really grounded in going, there are things that she has done that don't feel good. And I want to be so excited for her in terms of being the first female president, being a minority as the president. All of these things are groundbreaking and will be in the history books. And I'm going to be so proud to say that I had been there and that my vote helped do that. But I also am having a really hard time buying into and being one of the people that's going, in the same way that I criticized Trump supporters for giving him almost like a godlike status, I'm having a really hard time with progressives and Democrats who are just like brushing all the problems under the rug. And particularly for me right now is, yes, she has come out recently and talked about Palestine and the need for a ceasefire and the return of hostages, but she hasn't changed her stance on her support of Israel. Not really. And she hasn't really come out and changed anything that Biden put into place or said that she would be in any way changing her relations with Netanyahu. And to me, that's a really big deal. And the DNC is over now, and they did not let any pro-Palestinian or Palestinian Americans speak. That to me feels like the difference between being in your 20s in a relationship and going, no, but he said he's going to change and he's this and that. And someone going, hey, I'm looking at what you're doing now. So It's not a today thing. It's not this election cycle thing. It's not, maybe not even in the next election cycle, but I think something as a progressive, and likely I'm going to be changing very soon my registration to independent for the first time. I've been a Democrat this whole time.
Yeah, you didn't even tell me this.
Yeah, because I don't feel fully represented. And we talked about this last time where I was saying, is there going to be a civil war? And I don't know that I really think that so much right now. And you made a really good point about there are people worth fighting for in even the most red of red states. And we're not going to change anyone's mind, and people will still believe the things that they will believe, and racism will always exist, I think. I don't think that we live in a utopian society where like Kumbaya will suddenly be the anthem of the United States. But I do think that we can find a way to better represent the people of this country that feel underrepresented. And that also includes people that I haven't always historically paid attention to, which are white, lower class, middle class, blue collar workers, the same way that blue collar immigrants that are working fields feel underrepresented. Like they have so much more in common than they realize. And I just wish there was someone or some way to have that representation happen. I think she is a step in the right direction, but I don't worship the ground she walks on in that way. And yeah, I was having a hard time figuring out how to talk about this on this podcast because I was like, I don't want to go and be super negative. I want to have an air of like funny to the things that we do, and this isn't quite so funny. But I think this is as authentic as I can be with you guys. That is my vote for this time, but I do think there are issues that we get to tackle, and maybe, just maybe, we have to be a little bit more involved, because the reality of a book like The Parable of the Sower it's extreme. And I don't know that this would happen. I don't know that we'll be in a place where everyone's setting fire to everything and we're just in complete anarchy. But if it were a possibility, I would like to think that I did everything I could to help us move in a more united way.
And I think it's totally okay to feel that way. I think that people who are supporting Kamala, and that's including myself. For me, I don't look at her as the solution. I look at her as the inspiration for some little girl who's going to be the solution. Because if anybody is going...
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
That's when I sent you that TikTok, and it was like she was talking to 3 little girls, and they're fucking locked in.
That was amazing, actually.
What, they look like they were 12, 13 years old, maybe.
They had to have been like somewhere between 12 and 18.
They were definitely not 18. They were, I would say, in between 12 and 15. I'm gonna lean towards 13 right here. But watching the inspiration in their eyes is what makes me support her. It's not Kamala, because honestly,
just for context, it was a TikTok that Jeanna sent me, and it's just someone holding a camera, VP Harris, and she's talking to 3 girls in like a crowd of people, and the girl is saying, "You're such a good public speaker, and how do I speak like that?" And she just really levels with her and is like, "Hey, this is my advice for public speaking," and it's fucking killer advice. It's something that they want to know, and it's not about you, and no one cares what you physically look like. They want to know the information in your head. Such good advice, but they're so enthralled with her. They're
locked in. And that's, I do believe that the only solution to this world that we're living in, this patriarch that we're in, this man-led world, is going to be a woman. So again, is Kamala going to be that solution? I don't think so, but she's planting a seed for the girl who is going to be the solution. And that's what I'm excited about. Earth seed.
Sorry, just kidding. Earth seed.
So it's the people around her, and it's the people that she's inspiring right now that I'm excited about. It's because I agree with you. I've been trying to burn down this fucking political institution since I was a teenager. And I don't think that a 2-party system, I think we're just a big gang, basically. We're affiliated with gang. We even color code ourselves. If you're a Democrat, you wear blue. If you're a fucking Republican, you wear red. And it's so polarized right now that the people in the center don't know what to do with themselves.
And that's, I think, where...
And so it's like, what's the solution? We need more candidates that represent everyone. We need Hispanic candidates. We need Asian candidates. We need people who are for a tight budget, but really...
We need corporate money out of our elections.
We need corporate money out of the elections.
That's, I think, what's... that.
Because corporate money's in our elections, it will never change our candidate choices. You know what I mean? The funding's going to go where the funding's going to go. Am I stoked about her? I'm happy for her as a human to a human because, wow.
Yes,
to be
100%.
the first female president, that would be just jarring, crazy.
And she gives auntie vibes, like in the best way.
She is a leader in that way. And I don't think that any leader is going to be... It's really rare to find a leader where you're going to get more than 90% of people to be on board with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just with any group of people in general. Like, you're always going to have people go, I don't think that way. So if you can get a leader that gets people around 90%, which is not Kamala, like I said, this is very polarized where we're at right now.
Mm-hmm.
But if she can unite a certain percentage of people, then that energy is going to trickle outwards. It's going to trickle into the future. So
I think you're right. I think that's a really good way to think about it because I think, like I said, I don't think she's the wrong choice. I think she's the better of all the choices that we've had. And can we talk about Tim Walz?
He's lovable. But before we get into that, I do want to piggyback off what you said because I do think that there's people out there who resonate with what you said. So some positive things about Kamala is that she is the first female, first Black, first South Asian vice president in the United States. And that's a significant milestone in, history. Her legal career, before entering politics, she did have a successful career, the district attorney of San Francisco, and later as the attorney general of California, the first woman and the first African-American woman to hold that latter position.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know she was the first.
Progressive initiatives. As a Senator, Harris advocated for criminal justice reform, including co-sponsoring the First Step Act, which aimed to reduce the federal prison population and address sentencing disparities, which is a big deal for me personally, because I used to canvass for white people for Black lives and things like that. We did really tackle prison reform, and I still think that is a super, super important subject that we all need to take a look at because people are just in prison for far too long for the wrong reasons, right?
Yeah.
So she did that. That's awesome. She's an advocate for women's rights, obviously. So she's been a super strong advocate for reproductive rights, which obviously very important to both of us. And she's consistently supported policies that were aimed at closing the gender pay gap.
That's a big deal.
She's also been very vocal about the need for urgent climate action, and that's in recent history. So I don't know about her policies before, but right now she is on board with that, and that's really one of my main, hey, we need to talk about that a lot. We need to address it if we all want to just fucking live on this earth. Some of the things
if we don't want to turn into
if we don't want to go headfirst into Parable of the Sower, we do need to address climate change. And for maybe our more conservative listeners out there, I think I want to distinctively say that climate change is not something that's up for debate. It has happened through the Earth's history. The thing that we're trying to, or the pushback that people get in media is climate change directly linked to our influence, and whether that be oil, gas industry, what have you. And if you read reports on that, and that's from the oil industry themselves, the answer is yes, from the experts. I'm not an expert, but the answer is yes on that. Okay. And that's why I find it to be a really imperative subject we need to tackle.
Can I say something on that though? In the same way that I think that we have to get corporate money out of our elections, I also think there have to be more corporate regulations, because I think a lot of maybe more conservative people think when someone who is a little bit more progressive talks about climate change, they're like, oh, they want to take away. I think there was this weird thing on Fox News a couple of years ago. They were like, they want you to not eat hamburgers because there was a report that came out that said, oh, we have this many cows and
It's affecting the climate.
It's affecting the climate because they fart.
And it's the gas that's released from their stool.
Fart.
Any excuse to say farts for you?
So I think there's just like this skew, and they almost trivialize, and by they I mean Fox News specifically, will take something that is wholeheartedly intended to be informative and support the need for corporate reformation, and then they skew it in a way where everyday listeners go, oh, they're trying to take my hamburgers. Where no, it's not something like that. I always joke with Jeanna because she really wants to recycle, and as much as I want to recycle, the recycling system within the United States is not really conducive to actually recycling. So it's just a wash, right? The burden doesn't fall on, I mean, yes, we have to be responsible to not fucking litter our planet with shit. And we have to be responsible to have effective vehicles that are not like spewing smog into the air. However, just recently, the new CEO or the CEO for Starbucks is going to be super commuting from Newport Beach, California to Seattle 3 times a week on a corporate jet. In 1 week, he will release more emissions than a regular vehicle would emit in 52 years. In 1 week, he's going to be doing that. So when we talk, and by we, just like anyone in general who gives a shit about climate change, I'll just speak for us. When we are talking about climate change and reformation, I would really love for anyone who is a little more conservative to just take a fucking second and realize that this isn't landing on your fucking lap, Barbara. This is landing on the fact that we want this as a big reformation for corporations because they're the ones that are having oil spills. They're the ones that are polluting our oceans. They're the ones that are having their CEOs fucking take a jet from Newport Beach to Seattle 3 times a fucking week. Yes, no one is telling you that you can't have your fucking plastic bag. Would it be nice if you had a reusable bag? Sure as fuck would. But also, that's not the point for me when I talk about climate change and the actual tangible steps that we can take is that a corporation can make more of a change than 10,000 people using their reusable bags, right? So I really just needed to get that out there because I fucking can't stand when I see things like, oh, they're so progressive and they're blah, 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 and they're trying to take my fucking this or they're trying to take my fucking that. Just don't be a dipshit and realize that it's bigger than you as an individual.
Yeah, people don't like change and they feel threatened by it. But it is true, 90% of waste is controlled by corporations. And I think those of us that care, we do the best that we can. You know what I mean?
I have so many reusable bags.
We use glass straws. We do all those things. We just went to have breakfast this morning, didn't even use the straws that were there. Because it's what I'm doing my part, right? But if I'm throwing away, we'll say high end, 5,000 straws in my lifetime, right? A corporation is dishing out millions of straws every single day. And so if they change their ways, it's going to make a much bigger effect than my little glass straw. And you have to just think about that, rinse and repeat. Think about that as far as plastic bags go. Think about that as et cetera, et cetera.
Even the use of gasoline as fuel, it's less about your individual contribution as a person who's commuting to your fucking job 20 miles away, let's say 20 miles away on average, whatever. And it's more about what the fucking companies are doing.
I worked in oil refineries. So
I know you did.
I can tell you as somebody who had boots on the ground and worked out there for 6 years.
Little cutesy boots.
It's terrible what's happening. And the chemicals, things like that, what they're putting out there. Yes, it's terrible and it will have an effect on everything as far as air quality, ozone, things like that. And again, that's even backed by their own specific environmental scientists. But so sorry to get so far off subject. I did want to talk a little bit about some things. And this is only because I want everybody to be well-rounded when they're talking about candidates. Because as Adri said earlier, Palestinian Americans wanted to speak at the DNC. That was their request and they were denied. They brought fucking a slew of people in there. But the one person that they did not want represented was a Palestinian American.
They let Kenan Thompson from SNL have a slot.
So when we're talking about presidential candidates that are around us, They need, not necessarily do they need to have policies that we agree with 100% initially, but what we're looking for in a representative is somebody who listens to people when we say there's an issue, right? So she has said a couple things as far as Palestine is concerned at the DNC. Full disclosure, I loved her speech. I thought that was fantastic. And the last night of the DNC was magical. But some things that we need to think about as we go into her presidential candidacy is she has a pretty controversial record as a prosecutor. And again, this is old stuff, but we need to make sure we're taking into account when we put somebody into a political spot. So she's faced a lot of criticism for her record as a prosecutor, particularly for being a tough one on crime, which is what you were saying earlier about the 3 strikes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people were backing that in the 90s.
I remember that, actually. I remember I was pretty young, but I remember
Tough on crime. Everybody wanted tough on crime, right?
And the whole 3 strikes, because it just truly, I was a child. So I was like, oh, it's like baseball.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of people say that she was not as progressive on criminal justice issues during her tenure as district attorney and attorney general as she claims to be now, right? Again, what's most important is that she listens to her constituents. But these are some things we need to look out for. She has inconsistent stances. That's all politicians, to be honest. She's been criticized for shifting her positions on key issues. Again, I'm not really taking that as a negative because if her constituents are in support of something, I need her to be in support of it. Her handling of the border crisis, which you talked about earlier, and as somebody who is Hispanic, you're a Mexican American, it's completely valid for you to take that in consideration when you're supporting her, right? We're not going to do a deep dive in it today, but I do understand people wanting to know who's walking in the door, but we do need to understand that right now, people who are coming into our country and then getting locked up for years at a time and tortured, not okay, right? So I understand wanting to know who's walking in the door, but it takes people over a decade to get citizenship. And then when they try to come in, because more like 20 years, right?
Yeah.
Just getting through the door takes a lifetime, and you're wondering why people are trying to get in by other means, and then you're locking them up and ripping them away from their children.
Or taking black jobs.
Taking black jobs. This is a big deal, and this is a big situation. And again, there's a difference between knowing who's coming in the door and then punishing innocent people for getting caught trying to get in. So that's a big deal. There have been reports that she has strained relations with staff members. Again, I don't know any specific stories on that, but that's something that has been said. And in the past, she has faced polling challenges. We're not going to see a whole lot of that right now because
she's killing it.
Everybody's jazzed, including myself, for the reasons that I told you.
Mm-hmm.
But as she walks into her presidency, we need to make sure that we're keeping tabs on this.
Yeah.
Because I think what you expressed earlier is, yes, I don't want to get swept up in this and then it's going to bite me in the ass later and I'm going to be like, you're a huge disappointment. Trust me, every single politician that I've ever known or read about is a huge disappointment to me. So she's not going to let me down. But like I said, I do love that she's inspiring the people around her. So she's got my vote. I've actually been an independent for most of my life, and I swapped over to Democrat just to make sure that after Trump got elected, I wanted to make sure that my voice was very strongly heard as his opposition. Anyway, I just wanted to tackle that because this is a podcast where we talk about critical thinking issues. And so we don't want to just get caught up in what's going on. We want to use books like this to critically think about what's going on around us, while at the same time acknowledging the positives and some things that may be on the more negative side, and we want to look out for them in the future.
Yeah.
So if you're feeling similar to how Adri's feeling, and
I haven't really seen it, and I think that's why I was having a hard time deciding whether or not I wanted to talk about that like super transparently online or on the podcast, is because I feel like that's like an unpopular opinion right now. Everyone is so fucking jazzed. And again, not to say that I'm not excited for the fact that we will likely have
the symbolism of it.
Of the first female president in the United States. That's not I'm not in any way negating the importance and the really historical moment that we're living.
No, we want to go to the inauguration.
I know.
When she gets elected, we want to be there. We want to live stream it. We really want to experience that. I'm going to cry. Not to say that, but again, we're a critical thinking podcast. So we're going to talk about goods and bads.
Yeah. So I just wanted to be honest, and hopefully if there is someone who's out there, and again, will be voting for her, but is also there, just I don't know that it's her necessarily. Truly, I'm just so overstimulated by
Burnt
everything.
out, right?
And we've still got 73 days to go. So
Yeah.
just buckle in, everyone. We're going to get through it together. Gina's already picked our next book. So we're going to, I think, probably start to wrap up, do our quotes, each pick a quote.
Yes, the quote.
And then go into what our next book's going to be, and then leave you with that. We will definitely be back before the election.
Mm-hmm. Oh, real quick before we start talking about quotes, the most magical part of the DNC was Elizabeth Warren.
Oh, yeah.
So beautiful. And then also, not to cut you off,
Little John?
love Tim Walz.
I'm kidding.
Little John. Yeah. I was just telling her how crazy it was to I literally puked to the Shot song that he had, and then to see him perform at the DNC was so fucking surreal.
It is the experience of the true millennial to
Oh
be
my God.
oh my God, I danced to this.
This was
In my Jeffrey Campbell shoes.
right, this was very different when this initially came out. We did
I wore a bandage skirt and an off the shoulder top to the club while this was playing, and now it's part of the DNC. Do I feel old or do I feel seen? Which
do
one
I
is
feel
it?
recognized, or is this cringy?
A little bit of both.
I think so.
Yeah.
And then also Tim Walz, country. He's the country dad right now, right? Super adorable.
I had no idea who the fuck he
I
was.
didn't
I'm
know
not
who
even.
he was
I'm not even going to pretend
Yeah.
to know shit about him. But he is just the sweetest little baby angel. I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean that truly.
He's like a
wholeheartedly.
little baby bird that you want to hold
And
in
then
your
his
hand.
little- he's not little. His son who is like, that's my dad. I'm like, what's that like?
Yeah, what does that feel like?
What is that proud feeling of your father?
What's that? Holy shit, I'm swelled with pride because my dad's talking to bajillions right now.
It was so sweet. It was so pure. It was like, if I were more cynical, I would be like, wow, they really played this really well. But I'm like, no, I actually really find this so endearing.
And then this is just my little note. We were talking about Palestine and that we do support Palestinians on this podcast. To the, I think, 150 plus actors and writers that tried to take Bison's Emmy nomination away by signing a little petition to try to get that done.
Fucking Deborah Messing can suck every dick in the world for all I give a shit at this fucking point.
I hope that she has to play that game where a bunch of dudes jerk off into a cup, and I hope that it's like 1,000 of them, and then she has to drink it because
That's
she
so
lost the
gross.
bet.
That
I don't
is
give a fuck.
disgusting.
Like,
I know, but that is like
no, it's gross. But there's a special place in hell for all 150 plus of you, and I'm glad that I don't give a shit about the Emmys, and Bison probably doesn't give a shit about the Emmys.
She doesn't give a shit. She's surviving for her life right now.
For you 150 plus motherfuckers that really took time out of your day to try to stop this girl from getting any sort of recognition for the influence that she's had on the rest of us experiencing her struggle, go fuck yourself and eat shit.
I saw someone say, and I think this was perfectly put, it was the equivalent of someone trying to say that Anne Frank could not have written her book and had that, her story be told.
Right.
But just in a modern day, she used her phone, she used everything she had in front of her, and she was documenting the true atrocities that she is experiencing. So fuck them.
Mm-hmm.
And again, yeah, she doesn't give a shit about an Emmy nomination. She's just
trying to live.
She's literally still.
You know what she calls for? A ceasefire in Gaza so that she can live her normal life again and maybe recover from the months and months of trauma that is being inflicted upon her because of a terrorist group that got elected in 2006, I think.
It was in 2006 by a true minority of the people that are living today.
So fuck you guys with a hard F for everything that you stand for. And I hope that somebody shits in your coffee every single day for the rest of your life. And if I could be the person that put that shit in your coffee.
Such obscure insults is what I'm amazed at.
Look, they deserve to eat shit, and I hope it happens to you every single day for the rest of your life, honestly. I hope that whenever you put in your coffee order, it's never the right one. I hope that somebody steps on your toes every single day for the rest of your life. Thank you.
All right, then.
Let's go to the quotes.
Yeah.
All right.
Go first. Prepare my voice for it as if I haven't been speaking this whole time.
I didn't get a chance to say it, but actually, Bankole, he's my favorite character. I think that...
I didn't even ask you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. We've gone back and forth a lot on this one. This was a big episode. We wanted to make sure we were prepared for it because there's so much that's going into not only this book, but how it parallels with society. So Bankole, I really thought that he was a wonderful character in this book. And he had a lot of quotes that I really was just like, all right, that's an interesting guy. He's a doctor from San Diego. And he ended up trying to migrate over to, I believe it was Northern California, Humboldt County, where the weed is. And he's got some land up there. So that's where they all ended up heading. One of the quotes that I really liked from his is, sometimes there are no choices, there are only consequences. And for me, a lot of the times when I'm making an important choice in my life, I don't really think about okay, so how do I get to this goal? I think about, what I don't want, right? What are the consequences? Do I switch jobs? And I'm not saying that's not an actual thing, but just an example. Do I switch jobs right now? Okay, but what happens if I don't switch jobs? Do I just stay miserable for a while? Okay, then that's giving me my answer, right? So I really loved that quote for that reason. What about you?
There were actually a lot. Like I was bookmarking things as I was going along and going, oh, this is good. And like even early on in the book, but how I was saying Lauren's character with her hyper empathy and just like her like pulse on everything. Okay, so here's mine. Your teachers are all around you. All that you perceive, all that you experience, all that is given to you or taken from you, all that you love or hate, near or fear, will teach you if you will learn. I just love that. The second half of this quote is, God is your teacher and blah, blah, blah. And I have my own thoughts on God and my interpretation. And I do believe in God, but we won't get into that right now. So I just cut it off there because I think it speaks to exactly her character in saying she learns from everything. Her crutch is also her superpower.
Yeah, and I loved that take on it because I think without it taking it to such a literal physical thing, empathy is a superpower and then also your greatest vice.
Right.
In some
and
cases.
I think as someone who has a pretty high empathy threshold for people, it can be really exhausting. It can be really scary, but it sometimes is as simple as a perspective change to go, God, I'm so fucking tired, or I'm overstimulated, or I'm this, or I'm that. To then going and being like, oh, I can learn so much from everyone around me. And it really just depends on where I'm sitting with that and how burnt out I am and how tired I am. But really every single person around me can teach me something. And I can learn if I'm willing to do it. And that is the key, is a willingness and an openness to learn, observe, and even lean into fear. So
yeah.
That was mine.
You got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah. So do you want to talk about our next book?
I actually have one more quote from Bankole. This was my most favorite quote from him. It's, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
I feel like I've seen that before.
I'm not sure, but
I love that.
Yeah, because
I've got one more than two.
Okay, pull it out of me.
Okay, so this, I didn't write down who this one was from, but freedom is dangerous, but it's precious too. You can't just throw it away or let it slip away. You can't sell it for bread and pottage.
I love that. Gorgeous.
I think we really have taken our freedoms for granted sometimes, and sometimes it is a nice reminder that we complain and I don't mean you and I, we, like collectively.
No, sometimes I mean you and I. Even the fact that we are allowed to have this podcast is such a privilege.
Yeah,
that we can actively talk shit about our own country. And we do need to realize that. We actually We had a wonderful dinner with some neighbors of ours who one of them's from South Africa, the other one's from New Zealand. And
what a humbling reminder that we have freedom.
Such a humbling reminder, right? And I think that's so important. That's why it's really important to keep your circle diverse, is because as much as and I think I will always continue to throw criticisms out in a country that can sometimes take advantage of our status and power.
Mm-hmm.
And we just are so privileged, and we forget that. And we also forget that, though at this point in time, I'm not proud to be an American as far as our politics across the world go. I'm not proud of the support that we've given in Gaza.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not proud of that. But they did remind us that without America, it could be a free-for-all for everybody else as far as violence, aggression, things like that. So, again,
that's true.
It's a privilege that we even get to make the podcast. But just because we're in a place of privilege doesn't mean that we're not in a place where we need to demand the best of our government. So it's a balancing act, but it's always good to hear other people get their perspective on their experience, because it's good to be reminded of that sometimes.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with us for just around another hour or so and letting us talk at you about our thoughts and feelings about this book. Like you said, I know we'll be back before the election, and we'll have more things to say then.
Let's talk about the next book that we're going to be reading really fast before we go. And it's actually a graphic novel.
I'm very excited about this.
It's about 160 pages. And one of the reasons this was my choice, and it's called Persepolis. And Persepolis. I'll check the enunciation of that as we go. I intentionally picked this one because I think it's going to mirror what's at risk with this election when we're talking about 2025 and Trump and some of the policies and things that he's going to try to bulldoze through if he were to get back into office. But more to come on that one. Again, we haven't read the book yet, but I think it's going to be really relevant, and it's the reason why I chose it. After we're done, we're also going to be giving away these books. So something to look out for. All right, everybody. Again, thank you so much. I have noticed we have some new listeners across the world. We really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
And
I
seriously.
mean that so wholeheartedly. Thank you so much. We're so excited. We love this project. We love doing this. So if this is something that you enjoy, we're going to be here, whether it's one listener or
sky's the limit. But yeah, no, thanks for letting us have your time. I believe, and I'll always believe, that time is the greatest gift that anybody can give another person. So you giving us your time, it goes straight to our hearts. So wherever you are,
we love you.
Whoever you are, whether you agree with us or not, we love you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.